research, there's marketing, there's sort of the training part, but it all stems, and both for me and for them, I think on that question of, you have the internet. We talk about these undersea cables, right?
Right.
We talk about the famous stories, I think, under the Kibaki administration of what it took to sort of get the fiber, lit up and pulled, through the oceans all the way down to our shores and inland. So the question is, okay, if that's been around 20 plus years, then what, right? If you look at mobile phones from when SIM cards came in CD cases, I'm aging myself as a millennial now,
right.
And people are like, how do you have a 0722 number, my guy? How you moving like that? I had a SIM card before I had a phone, so I just move around. But again, question there is like, so if that's been there, then what? Same for social media, big platform shift now with AI. So that's what we do. But it stems from being curious. I think it's just about watching people, seeing their behavior, and asking either why do you do that, or looking at it and saying, if more people are doing this, so what? Like, what should people learn, and what should they do based on how people are using their phones, their tablets, cyber cafes, you name it. Like, even their kabambes, there's always so much to learn from just how we use tech. And once we know that, whether it's your grandparents and them listening to the radio and in retirement, or it's like a 6-year-old who just got given their first phone. Not that I recommend they get a smartphone that early, but you have everything in between. And it's one of the biggest unspoken things, but has so much influence on us.
So we're going to get into the internet and social media trends in just a bit, but you've traveled a lot, I believe across 37 countries so far.
40 by God's grace.
Good one. So what are some of the, I guess, what's the most defining chapter of your career thus far?
I mean, I think the one phrase I would sum it up as is, there's an author and marketing maestro, legend, guy called Seth Godin, and he says to look at your career like projects. And so what that does is it frees you from necessarily looking at your employer or your qualifications and your background as the door or the gateway to things. Right. And there's another a gentleman online, I highly value his insights. He's called, I believe it's Harry Mack, and he writes about a concept called high agency. And it's one of the most valuable concepts for me anytime I'm talking to like a young person or reflecting, because it's basically this mentality that says, I'm going to give myself permission, even though I don't feel qualified, I don't have the background, I don't have some of the things that even other people in that industry might have, but I'm going to experiment. I'm going to try to do things. I'm going to try to create quote unquote projects, even if they're not on like seen by experts as valuable. So like for me, I'll give a quick example. So part of how, by God's grace, I've been able to do a lot of that travel is by discovering, thanks to a really great friend and mentor called Rich Mulholland, that there's such a thing as being a professional speaker. Professional speakers typically are authors also. So that's why I had to start writing more, because you will get invited to speak if you've written, and if you speak persuasively or well, you get, again, you do that. And it's basically, they will fly you, they will cover your visa, they'll accommodate you, and then if you're in the, let's call it the top 10%, top 20%, they will pay you a speaking fee on top of that. And so this sounds crazy, but like once I discovered that, by God's grace, the way that it started was I wrote a cold email to a very impressive innovation conference in Norway in 2011. It was 6 a.m. I was in this startup that didn't end up going somewhere far, and we were basically in this coaching room. I wrote this mail because Richard said that's the best conference he's ever been to, and for weeks I didn't hear back. But legituma, right? I wrote that. They write back. They say we didn't know whether this is a Nigerian scammer or just some random off the internet, and it just escaped our spam. But you got us curious, right? Because and they were like, okay, record a 9-minute video of yourself. Tell us a story. Long story short, I do that video. We go back and forth a bit. They put me on stage like a speaker. Treat me like a speaker too, with New York Times bestsellers, director of marketing for Manchester United. You look at the roster, I did not belong anywhere there, leave alone that country, that continent at all. But that opened my mind up. And so later it was explaining M-Pesa to people in the US, in all sorts of far-flung places, something that we take for granted, but saying, can I package a story of how by the time you whip out your credit card, I'll have paid for the bill. Let me tell you about the greatest African invention you never heard of. And small stuff like that, hooks, the stuff I'm doing now. And so, the ability to tell stories is probably a red thread, but thinking in projects, because I've had the chance to write and direct a film. I did not go to film school. I had the chance to write 5 animated short films. I never went to any school to learn, writing for that. So sometimes my work, I won't lie, is bad. I have more failures and misses than hits.
Yeah.
But it's taken a lot of shots. And so that's the same mentality now, high agency, and just this point of view of trying to study and tell stories from either data or from experiences.
So I get the feeling that you've always been sort of like a creative most of your life.
Sure. I mean, I think I'm blessed, I won the sort of like, the quote unquote life lottery to be born into a household which had an appreciation for the arts. My mom is a semi-retired, I think, interior designer by profession. My late dad came from a family that was very, influential or rather, achieved some success. My uncle, sculptor, now, retired, but very, gifted in fine art. My aunt, a very acclaimed actress. So the two of them already gave me, again, some really great cover. And then, of course, my mom with that background. So I think I consider my brother and I very fortunate in that way. My brother, actually, for me, is a more amazing creative than I am.
Oh,
right?
Really?
He's based in Japan. His name is Tueli G. Look him up on YouTube. This guy's doing things that blow my mind every time. He's a trained civil engineer. All right, so that's what he did. He went to a company, built bridges, wore a suit and tie. But what he does every day, he works in a post-production company, doing film, and then he's a rapper. He raps in Japanese, shoots, directs, edits, does special effects for his music videos. I promise you see his stuff. If your mind is not blown, I don't know. I'm putting big money on it, because. But I just say that because I am a lot less maybe in the weeds as him. But again, we're gifted differently. But again, blessed by this creative background. It just meant we had a lot of freedom to fail and to be curious and not to feel necessarily a big pressure on us. And like I said, a lot more endurance or failure than most of the successes and headlines tell you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you also often say that data tells the stories. So that's if you know how to listen, right? Now, what are some of the stories, the trendy stories, if I can put it like that Kenyans are talking about in digital spaces as of right now?
Yeah, I think there's plenty. I think for me, one of the big ones is maybe even just a bit on that. So I think for me, one of the things I both encourage all of my teammates who work with me at Nendo, anyone who works with us, it's so possible to just let life pass you by. Our attention spans are being so, mined constantly and harvested for attention that you can be around people and not even notice things, right? Because we got to have that phone face down. I have to be looking up. I could be in the line for an embassava. I could be sitting, in a Java or a place. And if I just look up and look around me, there are stories happening. There's bits to observe. And you watch how people move, their patterns, where their attention is going. And I just say that because that's a muscle to build, and it's not there naturally in us. Our wiring nowadays will be pull out the phone, just get scrolling, occupy your mind. So I'd say that is a very valuable trait for anyone listening. But I think back to it for me, the online today, at least for me, there's maybe three big ones. There's a few of these we talked about in December. Some of them have come true because that's what Nendo does. We make predictions. So one of them for me is on TikTok. I think that TikTok, and part of it sounds obvious, but we severely underrate the influence of TikTok, especially here in Kenya, in my opinion, right? Because I think, for example, you go back to last year's protests, right? And everybody thinks about X. Why? Because, His Excellency President Ruto goes and does what? An X space, right? But the real, for me, underpinnings of a lot of that discontent, of some of the conversation, was not happening on X. I think we give X is valuable. It's great. I just posted something on there, but it's not for everyone. You'd be surprised how many people, when you talk to them, again, observationally, they don't like X. They don't like spending time there. They don't find it welcoming. They don't find it engaging. They don't actually enjoy it as much. But TikTok, Instagram, and for us, it's because, I'll give you a quick example. Somewhere like Wikipedia, right? We always wonder why are there more posts on Wikipedia? Wikipedia is very text heavy. Right. So there's people who again have skipped over an entire part of evolution. The same way we skipped from, say, the desktop, like the West adopted it, went straight to the mobile phone, then the smartphone. I think people have skipped over parts of the text internet, which X is based off of, and gone straight to TikTok. So there are people who, in our estimation at Nendo, and we've been saying this for like a year, I mean, one of the calculations we have is that Kenyans post at least 2 million TikTok videos a day.
Wow.
That's right.
That's a good number.
That's right. It's a good, because it's video, right? They post obviously more X posts because they're easier to, the barrier is lower. Yeah. But some of these people, you would argue, I'm not criticizing, I'm being specific, are some potentially functionally illiterate, meaning they are incredible speakers, thinkers, but they're not as savvy with texting, typing, writing. And TikTok works wonders because they just go straight to vernacular, and some of them are building a real name because wherever you look, any particular, so
they're sort of like influencers in their own right.
They are absolutely influencers. In fact, the challenge is we call them mashinani mavens. They are overlooked, underpaid, underrepresented, completely ignored by Nairobi-based agencies and the marketing decision makers. And yet they have massive constituencies, even in the diaspora.
Yeah, is it because they're not really Nairobi? Is that what you're saying?
Not only that, I think, they don't look the part. They might not send like a fancy, report after the engagement, right? They might not know how to send a neat Teams invoice. But again, they are producing music and content and talking sports and politics and gossip and news and information and culture, things that matter to that ethnic group. So there's a Mijikenda talk and a Nandi talk and a Kikuyu talk and a Kamba talk and a Luo talk and a Luya talk. And then there's a Bukusu talk inside there. Just break it down, whichever part of the country. And again, they're living very ordinary everyday lives, but they're looking to the front-facing camera and saying, this here is going to be the big thing for me. And so essentially you have a contingent of what we estimate will be one of the biggest, it'll be the biggest social network in Kenya by Nendo's estimate, at least by about February of 2027. Only because the stats say they're neck and neck, but those stats are not as accurate, in my opinion, saying we're at 15 million apiece. But the point back to you is so that we have this set of people, all of whom are looking for opportunities, and some of whom are even getting those through the virtual currency inside of TikTok. So your lions and your, that's the really big one, and, your roses, the tiniest one, and everything in between. And they're doing this from the diaspora. I mean, we've mapped out, we just did some research a few weeks ago about preachers, prophets, priests, sort of like priestesses, men and women who they have a chair, they have 6-7 phones and a ring light. They do not have an audience by way of a constituency, but let me tell you, some are making up to say 300,000 shillings or more off of just TikTok, and they send me this, I'll pray for you, and I'll do this, I'll do that for you, join me this time, this place. And so you have a very interesting set of things happening that are completely overlooked.
So that's going to lead me to my next question. You said something like brands need to be meaningfully different. And that the real opportunity now lies, for example, in Facebook groups and not pages per se, because of their stronger organic reach and community feel. So we have the rise of chat-based spaces, peer-to-peer, community networks and that kind of thing. So do you think we're entering a new golden age of digital tribes, so to speak? And how should brands adopt to that?
Yeah, I'd say that's a good point. I said that. And the context is, because I have a slight revision of that, but the context was that in 2025, someone might say, I'm starting a new business, brand, organization, or otherwise, especially if it's a large mass consumer, you want to reach millions of people, then the typical thing is to create a page, say a Facebook page on the largest social network in Kenya, I think 19 or 21 plus million monthly active users, more than, again, some of the other data sources might say. So again, the real sort of market leader, Meta, and Facebook still continues that dominance even today, but who knows for how long? And then who knows now when TikTok is sold, will it change here? Who knows? But to your point, now I'd say everything is video, right? So if you were going to go create a page, right, and you were going to do text-based updates, or you were going to create a group and it's all about text-based updates, whichever one you choose, yes, a group in Nendo's experience will give you a bit more organic reach and still has some really fun and interesting features around community. But the thing with everyone's algorithm now, and Facebook precisely, is that it is prioritizing video. And so you have to become video native. And that is the biggest and toughest shift that brands have had to face in the last sort of 7 to 10 plus years.
Why is it tough for the brands?
It's tough because they don't think in video, right? Video requires a sense of commitment towards motion, which just says, I take this image and I add motion to it, right? Logo moves like this, that. There's great AI tools to help, but they think in terms of what we call, and you might know this from the advertising world, which is part of what we do at Nendo, a content calendar. This post and that post and this bit and that bit. And yet globally, when you look at best practice, it's shifting towards video. Now that's where maybe the AI component comes in, because you can make what's called synthetic video. But of course, for us, the most organic, the most relevant will be actual Kenyans starring in that. And then the amazing thing about video is video the expectations have fallen from what we call high fidelity. I mean, I don't know how many cameras are in this studio, but this towards just a phone. And not just this phone, right?
Yeah.
Get me a phone that is 15,000 shillings or less, and you and I genuinely today can start the Kev and Mark thing. And I'm guaranteeing we post every day at least once, right? Even if we're just calling each other on the screen recording, we are going to be somewhere by the end of the month, as opposed to, oh, bro, you know, like I got to be, you know, Adobe Premiere and I need Final Cut and I got to cut this. The things have changed. So the barrier is lower for video and not as many people have gone there. But that's the future. That's what we're seeing today.
That's amazing. I like how you put it, man. So what about social media listening? This is something that you guys are big on at Nendo. And how important is it for brands to invest in that?
Yeah, I think for us, we think the biggest underappreciated, underinvested, overlooked, underestimated, aspect of this digital economy, this digital society, is that people are creating content. Yes, you have a lot of what we call lurkers. The majority of people online are just lurkers. They just look and leave, right? Even on this YouTube video, on any of these shorts, that'll be cut from today's show. But there are a set of people who, again, are creating content because, like, I'll give an example. Good friends at Odipo Dev and African Sensor, they had some research 2 months before the Gen Z protest last year. What is the number, the top 3 career choices, in Kenya for people 18 to 29, national representative sample. It is number 1 being self-employed or in business for yourself. Number 2, tied with being a doctor, is being a TikToker or content creator, right? And so within that, what it means is that people aren't just doing it like, I went to this place and I'm reviewing. No. I am a creator. So I'm a insert name of career choice by circumstance or by choice, and then add content creator. So what's that? What does that mean? It means that I will review places, products, experiences. I'll just be recording so much. That is gold. Why? Because people tell you their met needs and what they like. They tell you their unmet needs and who can build for those. And they give you market intelligence, right? In the hundreds, thousands, or tens or millions, right? Online. And you can look at that and get insights around politics. You can look at that and get insights around product, services, experiences. Now, let me give a quick brief between, I think people do social media monitoring and they don't always do it well. What that means is that at SpiceFM, at Kev Matara, you're going to see those 2 Y at SpiceFMK because those are your tags. So you're going to monitor those. You might ignore some, but you'll see them all. Listening means I go look for the phrase Kevin space Matara. I wasn't talking to you because I would have tagged you if I wanted you to see it. Some people call this a subtweet, but I was talking about you to somebody else. The weight of this is way more. And I'll tell you, we just did a big webinar on crisis for a bunch of brands. We had over 100 people join us at Nendo for it. And most crises in our view, they start here. But nobody's paying attention. Nobody's listening. They're monitoring for when they're spoken of. And you can imagine if we went, out here to this office or downstairs somewhere, right? We were in CBD, right? At some place. If you can hear when people walk up to you and talk to you, but the most important is if you could listen to when they're speaking about you, this is worth its weight in gold, especially when they talk about other people. That's social media listening. That's what Nendo has been doing the last 10 years. And we've been excited because the best gems, the best and most resilient brands, the smartest people in this city are doing that. But it's very few people, fewer than we think, in banking, in telecoms, in places where there's a lot of data.
Right. So you obviously bouncing off the fact that you've been doing this a lot, social media listening. Obviously, you studied how Kenyans use mobile data and social media deeply. What surprised you the most about our online habits?
I think even till today, it's what we call the 7 S's. There's the 5 S's in 2018, and then we added 2 more. So just real quick, I'll do the fastest version, which is 1 is search. So we use Google a lot. Android is our preeminent mobile operating system. No surprises there. But it's interesting to see what people search for. So, for example, I was talking about this with my team a few weeks ago. People search, it's October. People search for the phrase leakage every year at a certain time of year. And they're not looking for plumbing advice. They're looking for exam papers.
No way.
That's parents. That's students. And this has gone back over 10 years.
You guys will like more Kenya.
Bro. And let me tell you, people are very truthful to Google. People look for, the how to and how do I question from how do I kiss someone? Again, it's very private, very personal. No one's looking. I can't tell, who Googled it, but you'll see it in aggregate.
Are they on Google mostly or on ChatGPT?
So that's one thing. It's growing on ChatGPT. I'll come to that. That's one of the S's. But quickly, so I'd say that Google still has a dominance and a volume that's there. I think ChatGPT is going to take over, particularly how do I questions. And we've seen a lot of like amazing stories on this from parents with CBC finally feeling like they have a friend to teach them, to teachers themselves. You just take education. They're like, I've been posted to teach X, Y, and Z in CBC, and I was never trained or equipped for this. Not been sent somewhere to be further like equipped. So guess who's my friend? ChatGPT. And so they're getting more confidence to do things that they weren't previously qualified for, but are feeling again equipped, like they have a companion for that. And when we look at it, there's some data that came out in July. It was covered a bit in the media, but I think people missed the idea, at least on AI. So of all the countries in the world, according to a platform called GWI, Global Web Index, when they were asked, how many of you have used ChatGPT in the last week, of the sample, of which there's some sampling questions, we can get technical, but Kenya was number one. It ranked, and let me put, number two was Saudi Arabia. Let me tell you the difference. Saudi Arabia, it's the only country in the world where within the Emirates, and it's the UAE specifically. So the Emirates has agreed a deal with OpenAI where every single citizen gets ChatGPT plus the $20 a month one. They're not just using the free one. They're using the basically the one that money can buy, short of the $200 one. And Kenya still outranked them. Now that for me opens up a view that we are watching a massive platform shift. And so we've been at the center of that with just some of our work in AI research, AI marketing and comms, and AI training. Because I mean, the thing with AI, which we talk about at Nendo quite a lot, is that you can actually use it badly or suboptimally.
Yeah, when you say Kenya outranks them at that, is it the number of Kenyans who use it, or is it how often we get into
excellent question. This is the great thing about interpreting research. So it is the percentage of people from the sample who said they had actually done that in the last 7 days, of which Kenya led with 42%. So that was the highest ranked of any other country in the world who said that they had actually used ChatGPT specifically in the last week. Most people will know about it, but will they use it? Not necessarily. ChatGPT, on the other hand, also is quite clever or coy, maybe some people say sneaky, because they report only weekly active users. So it's not yet become big enough that they would report daily. People will check X daily, they'll check Instagram daily, they'll obviously check WhatsApp daily, Facebook daily, but ChatGPT, sometimes they'll check weekly or not as much. And that's still a problem for ChatGPT, if I'm being honest. But in terms of the curiosity, that's been there. And again, many people are using it even as part of the online work that they're doing, of which, there's many others. But, search is one. I think sport is the second one. Most Googled, companies the last 2 most Googled word the last 2 decades has been a sports betting company. I think that could be a public health crisis on our hands potentially.
I think so too.
But obviously, I think there's news in the in the dailies here. I mean, a big media house of how KRA, the Kenya Revenue Authority, has doubled the amount of tax it collects from them. Like we're talking about in an economy where people say it's also like to go from 5 billion to 11 billion, which is, I mean, on one hand you say, okay, wow, that's a lot of collections. On the other hand, you say, then what's the percentage of growth that they're experiencing if this is the amount that is actually being collected by the tax authority? So big questions there. But I think it says about, English Premier League, more sports and entertainment. It holds a place. You talked about Safari Sevens. So Kenyans love their sports. Social is next. We talked about TikTok. Adult websites, not much to say there, but they're very popular in Kenya. I know it's an after-hours show, but I don't know if it's that after-hours show.
Okay.
And then the last one is stories, which is your news, politics, culture, information. The next one is illegal streaming. So this one caught us by surprise, but Kenyans, it doesn't matter what the site is, they're going to find some place to illegally stream the sports, the series, the movies, the entertainment, even local stuff. What surprised us, there's Tanzanian and Nigerian sites that are now, they're saying, why just let it be Western guys with all those intrusive ads and malware and pop-ups. So that's, of course, it's questionable in that people like this get arrested. It's an actual crime, but Kenyans seem to be taking those risks. And then the last one is AI, which is what you talked about, we call it the simulation. It's like alliteration.
Another thing that stood out for me is that you mentioned how one thing that marketers and brands do wrong in Kenya, or get wrong about Kenya, is they have a very strange obsession with numbers and data. I found that to be a very fascinating fact. Maybe you can expound on that.
Yeah, I think there's a phrase, not all that can be measured is meaningful. Or I think some people also say not everything that is countable counts. right? Or not everything that counts can be counted. And all of those are just fancy ways of saying that digital will show you numbers. So, for example, I had said to you off air that the death of mainstream media has been greatly exaggerated. Now, two things can be true at once, right? Which is, on one hand, that audiences, and you ask the good friends of Nendo at Ipsos or Kantar or Real Analytics, any of these other like firms, and some of them will tell you that there is growth and maturity, and Geopol too, right? So to some degree, audience-wise, there's growth, or at least there's a stagnation at very reasonable 20+ million TV in aggregate, maybe 22 million radio in aggregate, plus minus on each one of those. But that says that the audience is actually still paying attention and weaving this into their day.
Right.
Advertisers, on the other hand, though, are not coming the same way. That's what's affecting the larger media landscape.
Right.
That part of the equation, which is that bring me audience, I'll bring you advertisers, and advertisers want audience, and vice versa. That's the two-sided side of the coin, and the side with focused on the side that's focused on advertisers just hasn't held up the same, hasn't invested the same, and that's one of the challenges. There's also larger things in media like consolidation around one private media house. I'm not here to talk about that. But I say that, and now we go back to it, which is for digital has some limits, right? So if you're doing what we call effective marketing, you might not go strictly digital all the time. Like we started and we were very digital-led, digital first. In fact, we just came back. I just came back with my colleagues. That's why I was away on the weekend. We are, I believe, Kenya, East and Central Africa. I don't even think Nigeria or Ghana have ever been a finalist in what's called the Luri Awards in South Africa. These are essentially the Oscars of advertising and marketing and comms all over Africa, 70+ countries, including the Middle East. And we are the first finalists in the digital and influencer category of anyone. Now, other people have won, and there was some great work that won a Grand Prix, etc. But for us, it was amazing just being there in the room and knowing that we were flagged for this and chosen from tens of thousands or thousands of entries. Now, why do I say that? Because digital is great, but digital has an end. We talk about, for example, we said this off air, that for people who think on one hand that, I'm just going to reach people on TikTok or X or Meta, Facebook, Instagram, otherwise, understand every single device or every single user has a tailored and customized algorithm. So we don't always see the same things at the same time. We do with television and radio because it's a static and linear broadcast. But that means that we're there, but we're all fractured. I see maybe some francophone stuff. I see some Lingala, because that's my jam. And so my algorithm learns me. Right. So to that degree, yes, I think people need to break through. Their influences are valuable. But going back to the question of numbers, what this means is digital is the easiest to give you numbers. But billboards still have value even in 2025. They do, right? And so does radio. In fact, for me, radio is, in my opinion, like underappreciated. So I'll give an example. In the last year, we've had clients do radio. Right. Here and in other countries, we've had clients do TV, clients do billboards. That's as Nendo, because when we're looking at effective marketing, you can go all in on digital, I don't lie, but there is a way to basically be holistic. And if you're looking for that, you get better effects for reach. When you actually go.
So if I have a limited budget, for example, I've just gotten into Biashara Nini and I have some advertising money. Where does it make sense? Where can I get better ROI? And where can I convert? When I'm looking, of course, in terms of engagement, more. Is it like digital, or would you advise me to just have a more balanced approach and go holistic?
Excellent question. I'd say that the shortest answer I'd give is start off digital. Because in marketing, there's two things we're trying to make happen. You're trying to have what we call physical availability, which means that if I send you 100 leads, can you satisfy them all? If you can't, then you don't need to get too much of what we call mental availability, because mental availability here, in Standard Group on SpiceFM is going to get me reach of millions. I better be willing and ready to convert that. Otherwise, what happens is I'll waste it and then the other thing is maybe as a side note, many people are almost instantly forgettable. They're almost instantly forgettable, not their fault. But they forget that, I don't just want to hear about your features and benefits. Why? Because I got so many tasty things in my algorithm. Right. So you have to connect with me emotionally. Wow. You have to be creative. You have to be a bit risky. You have to be in a way that I'll remember you, right? When you think back to ads, campaigns of the 90s, from your Kimbo to your Blue Band to your you name the brand, many of them, there was a bit of a song. There was, you can think of brands, and the reason they come to mind now is they made an emotional connection with us. They didn't sell us on flavor or they sold us on something higher.
Yeah.
And too few people, even small startups, right, don't do that. But the basic job of marketing, effective marketing, is three things.
Yeah.
Make it easy to come to mind, and you have to be creative for that. Easy to find, right, which is the physical availability, and easy to buy. So if I want to buy from you do those three things.
Yeah.
Honestly, you can use digital alone to start, scale up as you go. And many people do, right?
Yeah.
How many people do we know right now, if we open our phones and look at status, right on WhatsApp, that they have 20 plus whatevers, because that's it. That's where they share stuff and they reach people and they're watching their stock and they've kept it there. Others are running some basic Facebook ads, or they've got IG, Instagram, they're doing some ads there, DM for prices, they close the deal there. And then you have levels up where people are now working with influencers, reviewers, and then there's people who need to reach the whole market so that a handful of people buy. Those people will need to actually do radio.
We'll actually talk about the power of influencers later on, because I know some folks were questioning them, whether they can actually convert. But but for now, before we take a break, you mentioned after cash, mobile money, and airtime, megabytes are an important currency of the digital economy. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, and again, I appreciate you. This is one of the better research interviews, I'll be honest, because there's so much that we write, and some people say, Mark, you guys have really great stuff, but it's buried on page 24 of like this long PDF, right? And I didn't read that far. Yeah. And of course, with AI now, that's also the wonderful thing. But exactly. I can always tell when the research has gone a bit above and beyond. So thank you, Kev. That's great platform. Now, I think for me, it's a really simple idea that says that the central bank governor knows the motion of of cash in and out. Yeah. The Treasury does as well, right? The cabinet secretary, will have to report on the state of the economy. And so you have this entire infrastructure saying money in, money out, money moving is extremely important to us. Where is the equivalent on this side? So a question we asked in that same report is, Kev, who taught you what a megabyte is and how much it costs and how to use one? I'm genuinely asking. Yeah. Now I'm turning the tables. Who taught you that?
Who taught me? Wow.
Or when did you learn about that? Oh gosh, these things,
Not so long ago.
They finish.
Probably 2011, 12 over there. Yeah.
Did you learn about them when they got finished and done and were over with? Or did you learn about them before and learn how to buy them?
Finished and done.
There you go, right? Yeah. And why do I say this? Yeah. Because not only must you learn how it's bought, sold, and traded. If I give you 1,000 and you give me 1,000 back, we know what's what there.
Of course.
If I ask you right now to buy at least 1 gigabyte, there's probably at least 40 different ways you can buy it.
Right.
And that's a bit, throws people for a loop. How do I buy data?
Yeah.
Right? So there's people in Nairobi who still buy data for people up country. Why? Because there's a bit of a challenge. Now, over time, that's going to resolve itself. But I say that because that aspect of a megabyte and knowing where they go means people have to make an economic decision. Same way they make cash decisions in the economy. So the digital economy still has a constraint that's not time and not attention. It's why also TV and radio for me still resonate and have reach. They make megabyte-based decisions. And that was from our 2018 report. I think it's still true today. And we validated that now across over 20 African countries.
That makes a lot of sense. So that's why most folks across the country, they'd rather listen to radio, watch TV, because they're not spending the currency.
Exactly.
The megabytes.
And I'll give you another example, right? So if you're accessing Facebook, for instance, I don't mind to talk about everyone. There is a, is a version of Facebook, right? That uses no megabytes. Right? Facebook Lite, Facebook Zero. If you go to TikTok, right? They were one of the pioneers of this. 10 shillings, getting you 1 gigabyte of TikTok only data.
Right.
Can't use it to call on WhatsApp. Can't use it to watch any other video. It's just TikTok only. YouTube followed suit. And the point of that is that everybody's trying to unwire and unshackle minds from I climb up and I tense up when my bundles are being used to, I have an hour. And so what I can do now is I can actually stream, I can consume. And so you talked about podcasts, right? There are people who are podcasters without being on YouTube, without doing anything we think about, because they're strictly on TikTok. I mean, I saw the other day, I think I saw it today. There's an entire TikTok dating show for over 40s. People are making all sorts of interesting content that is just not your everyday fare. And so that's, again, a substitute a bit for the television. But in 2015, one of our trend reports said, this is the second screen. So that was one of our first ever trends, that people don't just watch the TV anymore. They watch it with this in hand. And that was X at the time. It can be TikTok now and many things in between.
That's interesting. So hold it right there. The one and only Mark Kaigwa. Wow. Digital strategist, author, founder of Nendo. And today we're talking the business of attention. Why you scroll is the new currency. We're coming back in just a bit. A couple of minutes to the top of the hour. I've got some Desire with Love and Return. Twendekazi.
Playing the best music for hard-working Kenyans who are getting the job done. Spice up yourself.
Is it everything I do?